All right, today I'm going to show you how I built a T-Rex enclosure with no fences. That's right, no fences. Dino conditions on, no mods, no cheats, and no escape. Let me show you how I pull this off. So the first thing that I do here is I make this perimeter with the path to show how big we need to make this enclosure. I know from testing this before that a Tyrannosaurus needs 9 full boxes of path for its entire enclosure. I like to round off the sides here to give it a little bit of a softer or a smoother perimeter that makes it feel a little more natural and just a little bit less boxy. But getting this shape right and what you're looking for is huge early, because later when we make our border, we won't be able to change it quite as easily. Inside the path, I sunk the terrain just a little bit, nothing dramatic, just enough to give the whole exhibit a sense of depth. This will make the final enclosure feel more realistic and less flat. So now we have this sunk in enclosure here, but what I'm going to do next is I'm going to create this wave effect. I'm building hills and valleys along the border we just sunk in. And why am I doing that? Because we're going to ring the enclosure with rocks. When it comes to the slope of these hills, we make the steepest slope we can so we can use this temperate rock. We sort of trick the game into thinking that the hitboxes are less strict, and it gives us this chance to put these rocks over the top of each other, which normally we wouldn't be able to do if the surface was as flat as it might normally be. So we're gonna go through the entire enclosure with this rock specifically. And don't worry, the Rex tests this border, so it does work and it will not pass through it. Next, once we've completed all of our rocks here, we're going to go back through this and we're going to flatten out all of that terrain around it. So we're going to go through the entire perimeter and make sure everything is flat on the side here. And that's, as you're seeing there, you're going to see the rocks just go over the top of each other, and it does create this more natural perimeter where we don't need to use the fences that we might normally want. Now, this does also have an additional benefit as well that we'll get into as we get a little bit further on in this build here. So Tyrannosaurus Rex also requires a ton of forest, and so we're going to take the side here and just add a little bit more of that natural forest, and we're going to keep adding to that as we go to make that forest eventually blend in with the stuff outside of it. But I also want to create this little plateau hill in the middle here because I don't want the entire enclosure to be visible at everywhere that you're walking around it. So I want it to be one where you have to walk around it a little bit, and sometimes that Tyrannosaurus might not be visible to you depending on where you're standing. After that, we do need to add the water in here, and if you use the brush here, it does create a little bit of a larger water here, and I like to create smaller rivers, so we're going to use the brush to just put the water in, and then using that remove tool, I'm just going to touch the sides of this and remove more of that water. Now, as you get a little closer to some of these, it might feel like the river like that is removed, but actually if you get a little bit closer to it, the water's still there. It just is a little more like a mud spot, so it still feels natural. It doesn't feel like it just has to be all what we'd think is deeper river. And then we can start putting our Rex in here as it's ready to go. So we'll add that in now. Rex needs some kind of prey, and so we do put the goat feeder in, and the goat feeder has a sandy base to it, and so putting it near that water where we're going to need to put some sand anyways, because sand's also something that T-Rex requires, is going to make this feel, again, a little bit more natural and feel like that feeder isn't just out of place with the terrain that it goes under it. And after that, we add a ton of rocks. So we're going to just continue to put more and more rocks in here, and we'll add more as we go. And then again, more forest on this side here. And then again, we want to connect this so that it feels a little bit more natural to the rest of the forest. So removing some of this path we'd started with, and then that forest is going to bleed into it here, which makes it nice because it feels like this is not just a rock barrier, which it is on the side here, but you can't really see it as much. As we go through, you can check the Rex's comfort level, and if we're having the comfort or the dino conditions on here, we can see that we still need to add a little bit of sand in here as well. And then as we come back to that Rex, you'll see its land that it uses is actually beyond the natural fence that we have here, which is great, so that if you don't feel like you want to put everything inside the enclosure and make it feel like it's just packed, you can use space outside of it, and that will still be considered part of the Rex's habitat. So this is one way to know. Some people like to not have the dino conditions on because they feel like it requires way too much stuff in there. But you can use this if you want to just eliminate some of that restraint when you're building out these enclosures. It's also nice when you're doing this because when you have a border like this, the Tyrannosaurus will still look like it can access the people, but even when I turn the dino threats on, it doesn't actually register as a threat to people because it doesn't have a way to actually get to them. I wanted to add some more water, and then I decided that we'd blend that water in closer to the path to make it feel a little bit closer to the people, makes you feel like you're a little more involved in the environment. Only challenge with that is that it makes this wall that I'd had here, or that slope, it just makes it a little more wonky. So I tried to play with it a little bit and add that and see if I could raise it with still keeping the water there. It didn't really work, so we're gonna just use that as part of our terrain restraints, and we're gonna just slope down a little bit. So you're gonna have to walk down just a bit and get maybe closer to rock level as you're walking through the enclosure there. So one thing as you're building this, I did want to add the plateau in here and out of space where it felt like the dinosaur had to more walk down and get a little closer to the people. Outside the enclosure, I lined the path with planter boxes. They look great, but more importantly, they act as a visual barrier for guests. It keeps people from feeling like they could just step into the Rex's territory here. Adding more scenery, more rocks, and just making sure that we feel like this is a more lived-in space with just more of those just rocks. Now, I couldn't resist, for science, I drove a Jeep into the enclosure. It flipped over the rocks. I got a little closer to the Rex. Might have honked a few times to get its attention, and then took a quick picture for science. And let's just say the Rex didn't appreciate it. The Jeep is now permanent dino enrichment, or a nice piece of park theming, depending on how you spin it. And here's the final product. Guests strolling along the path, the Rex roaming naturally in his habitat, and not a fence in sight. If you're on console and want more Jurassic World Evolution builds, subscribe now. I've got more tutorials, challenges, and experiments coming every week. Drop a comment. Which dinosaur should I try this with next? Spino, Pachy, Indominus? Let me know.